really excited to be here. Thanks a lot to Rackspace for allowing me to be in San Francisco and have this meetup. It's my second time in San Francisco. I was here in May as well after Monotrama. But this time I've been able to interact with a lot more people, and it's been really great. So thanks for that. Yeah, I'm gonna talk a little bit about Grafana, and I guess some people here use it already. Some people might have just looked at it. So it's I'm gonna try to do both sort of a short introduction, so why people use it, why people like it, and also sort of talk about sort of new features and where the project is heading, what's upcoming in the. So yeah, my name is Torkel Ödegaard is how you pronounce it in Swedish. Mostly it becomes Torkel in English. I figured out now that when I order coffee at Starbucks, I figured out that I can't mention my real name, so my Starbucks name is now Tom, because they always got it wrong, and I never knew when my coffee was ready. But someone suggested that my Starbucks name should be Thor instead, which I guess I have to beef up a little bit more than. Yeah, I live in Stockholm, Sweden, and I worked as a contractor for eBay Sweden, and we started using Graphite a lot for application metrics, business metrics, just to get better observability into our sort of all our different applications and services. But the adoption for Graphite was it was something I introduced together with the ops team, but the adoption was really poor. I tried to sort of get other teams to instrument their applications and build dashboards, but they usually just came to me and tried to get me to build their dashboards and show them how to instrument applications. And a lot of that was something I think was due to sort of the default Graphite UI was sort of really clunky, and it was really hard to both sort of understand how you build metric queries and how you edit them, and sort of, okay, how does this query work? You get this really, really tiny text box, and you're supposed to sort of understand what this query does and which parameter is matched to which function. So that was really sort of a pain point. And of course, these dashboards, you can't sort of zoom in on the graphs and interact with them. And there are a bunch of other dashboards, but we tried them, and they didn't really solve all those pain points. So we started using Kibana last year, and I really liked that, the capability in sort of composing and building dashboards in Kibana. So I started from that to get the basic dashboard features in Kibana, and I started trying to add Graphite support or add a Graphite panel. And then I figured, oh, this is pretty great, and I sort of tried to imagine my dream Graphite dashboard. And sort of, yeah, this is how it looks. I'm going to show a lot of demos later on. I'm going to run through a little bit about sort of the background. So when I had the initial things working, I really wanted to sort of not just be another Graphite dashboard. I wanted to really make querying easier, and sort of using all the rich features and functions in Graphite, making that more accessible and easier to understand and edit those queries. And this is a very standard Graphite query. So you have a metric key with one or two wildcards, and you wrap that in a bunch of functions. And this can be quite hard to read when you have 3 or 4 functions and nested queries and nested metric keys. So I just figured that I could actually present that in a different way if I wrote a Graphite parser to actually sort of build an object model for this query, and I could unwrap the function calls and put them in a sort of chain-like manner and build a UI. So all the parts of the metric key can be interacted. You can sort of change one part to be a wildcard, and you can interact with the functions and easily add them and easily change the functions. And I think this just really made the Graphite functions more accessible and more understandable, because you could really easily see how your query was affecting the metrics. Because you can see, okay, this is the metrics I'm getting. I'm scaling it to second, and I'm applying a moving average, and I'm aliasing by the second node. So the wildcard there all those servers in this case is going to be what's being shown in the legend. So so that was something I was really sort of proud of, and yeah, it's one of the main features I'm really proud of in Grafana. Yeah, another thing that was a main pain point in the default Graphite UI was having sort of a way to create generic dashboards that you could reuse for different servers or different applications or different experiments or something, where you have a similar metric structure that you're reusing. So if you have the same metric structure, you don't want to create the same dashboard just with a very small metric key part that is different. So I created this concept of templated dashboards where you could create template variables that you can sort of use in parts of your metric key, or you can actually use them in function parameters as well. So let's see. It's a bit blurry because the resolution isn't that great, so I have to scale it down, but I hope you can see. Yeah, it's like most sort of graphing dashboards, you create the rows and graphs, and you can interact with. A new feature in 1.9 is that you can actually, when you hover, you can see all the series names, all the series, and not just the series that you're hovering over. And it's a little bit hard for me to do this. I have to look at that TV here. Yeah, so you can everything can be viewed in full screen, and if I edit this, I can sort of easily add another function here. I could apply transform to null, or any function is very easily accessible here. And if I add a new query, I can very easily sort of navigate the metric key space, but I don't see anything what I'm doing right now. I'm just picking metric parts here. Yeah, and then I can add functions, scale to seconds, and maybe a moving average, and 5 data points. I hope do you see anything? Because I don't. Yeah, so and you have really rich sort of display options for having multiple y-axes. I really liked the graphing features in Graphite, in that you could have multiple y-axes and you could really control how the graphs looked, and that was really rich. So I wanted sort of to provide the same thing in Grafana, and you can have very detailed control of how your graphs look. You can have sort of multiple y-axes. You can mix different styling, and another thing that's so I'm just going to show how this templating looks. Yeah. So as I mentioned before, you create these variables that you can actually see at the top here. You have an app variable and a server variable, and in this case we have an interval variable as well. And so if I select this, select the backend here. Oh, missed that. The graph will change to only reflect the backend servers, and if I select a specific server, that will change as well. And these variables are defined as a metric query, so it actually inspects the time series store to figure out what kind of different values exist for this part of the metric key. And the nice thing about the variables is that you can nest them. You can sort of use in the server query. In the server variable, you actually use the app variable to sort of create these nested variables. And the nice thing here is that you can very easily use them. So instead of hard coding parts of your metric key, you can actually just use these variables. Let's see. And you can also use, as I mentioned before, you can use variables in queries as well, and you can use them in alias as parameters to functions, and like in the alias function or in the summarize function here. And you can use them in the title as well. So I could sort of put, instead of hard coding this, to min, I could use interval here. And oh, I mistyped that, but yeah, interval variables is you can sort of very quickly change the group by, or sort of the summarization level. I probably should switch this to bars. It's easier to see, and zoom out a little bit. And you can. This is sort of for very overview dashboards where you have might want to view a metric group by an hour, but you have a bunch of graphs and maybe want to quickly change it to view something by day. Very useful for sort of business style metrics where you sort of want to see signups per day or conversions or something that you want to quickly change how you group those. Yeah, and we have another sort of core feature is the annotations, where you can augment your graphs with event data, similar to what Librado showed before. And support Elasticsearch as data sources. We can fetch them from Graphite, as sort of Graphite events, or Graphite metrics can show up as annotations, and InfluxDB as well. Okay, so I'm gonna show a little bit what's new in this release. 1.9 was just released a couple of days ago. So I think I have a dashboard for 1.9. So I also have a new panel, which is not called big number, or
what do you get, big number?
Yeah, I call mine Singlestat. But it's basically the same thing. You have a big number. And it's quite flexible in that you can sort of specify what the value should be, if it should be an average of the time range, or if it should be the current, max, min, total. And you can specify sort of prefix and postfix, just text you should see before the value or after the value, and you have some control over the font size if you want a really, really big number. But the nice feature is here that you can specify these thresholds that you can sort of match to colors, so you can sort of get a bird's eye view if you have a TV displays of sort of some core metrics. And you can sort of change for these threshold values if it should be the background or just the value that is affected by these threshold numbers. And you can also sort of, if you want to have, instead of just a number, you might want to have a 0 map to OK, or 1 map to failed or something. So you can actually map values to text as well. And if you want, you can have this sort of spark line at the bottom of your Singlestat panel. Another thing is that you can actually have a panel act as a link. So all panels can have links to other dashboards or other websites. And in case of the Singlestat panel, the whole panel is sort of turned into a link. So if I click on this, I will go to a dashboard that doesn't actually exist in this case. So that's the Singlestat panel. A lot of people seem to be happy there. That's one of the sort of main things people have been requesting for a while, is sort of new panels. But I've just sort of been focused on making the core features and the graphing really, really solid. So, which is, it's getting there. So that's why in the last release I've been able to focus on actually adding a new panel, and that will be expanded upon. I mean, the Singlestat panel will be improved, and more panels will probably come in the future. So another new thing in 1.9 is another sort of visualization for time series, is that you can have a fill below 2. So you can specify, or you can visualize like a min and max, like a shadow behind an average. And this is something that you can add in display styles. You can sort of specify that the max series should fill below to min. And in this case, I actually disabled lines for these series. So if I don't have any sort of styling overrides, Yeah, it's just three series. But I can sort of specify that for the max series, I want to have that be fill below to the min series, and all that styling will be applied. Some other new features is a new look for the legend as a table mode. And you can also sort of sort the legend. And you can actually toggle the legend on and off if you sort of don't want it to be shown by default. You don't have to enter edit mode. One of the sort of the things that one of my favorite new features is actually that you can share a panel so you get a link, and this link will actually take you to that panel at that point in time. And it will take you to that panel in full screen mode at that point in time. If you use template variables, all of that will be carried over in the URL. I think that pretty much covers most of the enhancements in 1.9. So I'm going to jump to sort of what I'm working on and what's coming in next year. I have for a while, but it's been sort of like 10% of my time I've been sort of playing with a Grafana backend. Because there are some things that Grafana today doesn't have a backend. It's just purely a front-end application. So the things I want to do with the backend is render panels server-side to be able to share them on HipChat, Slack, and maybe have Hubot integration, and eventually maybe have alerting features as well that sort of requires.
Is it a native app or a web app?
Right now it's a web app. Everything is web. So
Snapshot the canvas using Phantom.js.
Yeah, exactly. So I did a sort of proof of concept where I spin up Phantom.js on the server and capture an image of a single panel, and it sort of works brilliantly. It works perfectly. I'm also add sort of user authentication management and rights. It's something that some people have been requesting. And eventually, I completely agree with you that sort of, at least in many organizations, the connection between metrics and alerting is a field which hasn't sort of been solved. It's very in its infancy. I completely agree, and I think I've been talking to a lot of people. I haven't started working on anything alerting related because I've been doing a lot of research, but it's I completely agree with that. That space is in its infancy. But I still sort of, I really like, I haven't so far looked at metrics as an source of alert. I mostly use it as a way to see trending and look at application metrics, just understand what's happening in production, to provide feedback onto sort of how you develop features and and what caused an outage and see correlations. But the alerting side is really, really hard. I mean, to do anomaly detection and do smart alerting, it's, I have, so just gonna see if I can do a very short demo of the backend part. Yeah, so this is a very, I mean, this is, it's very far from being released. It's going to be open source. It's going to be sort of a Grafana with a backend. It's initially going to be optional, so Grafana is still going to exists as a very simple, pure web application. But if you want those features like server-side render panels, authentication, So maybe sort of use graphs, have graphs as separate entities that you can reuse across dashboards. Yeah, and I'm just gonna see if this works. But let's say we want to share this, and you can get an image. And yeah, this is a PNG rendered server side. So, and of course, I want to have sort of tight integration with Hubbot and HipChat and Slack, so you can just click on it and share it directly, or have Hubbot get you a graph. And it's kind of nice with when I initially come to alerting, you can sort of have an alert and a graph included in sort of. So, any questions? Yeah, the backend is written in Go. So it's probably, I mean, right now I'm using SQLite and Postgres just to be able to have sort of that single binary, no dependency, easy getting started experience. If you have sort of larger setups, you probably want to have sort of MySQL or Postgres. So that's, I'm probably not going to use Elasticsearch, but I have, yeah, but I will probably have, so might have some migration path. So for people who run Grafana right now with Elasticsearch, you carry over all your dashboards. Yeah, it's on GitHub. I should mention as well, I don't have the slide. I'm working on this full time, mostly paid sort of with my own savings right now, but I have 2 sponsors that help a bit. They're really grateful for sponsors, and Squarespace is a sponsor, and DreamHost is a sponsor. So I'm really thankful for them for supporting this project.
So I assume that the Elasticsearch provides some kind of caching. So we were curious about what that actually does, given that it's querying Graphite.
Yeah, I mean, the dependency I have on Elasticsearch right now is only to save and search dashboards. And that is something I sort of inherited from using part of the Kibana code base when I started. So it's a dependency that might feel sort of weird. But when the first version that came out sort of was a lot of people who actually used Kibana as well, so they had Elasticsearch. And I just haven't had time to sort of add support for MongoDB and other types of databases. If you use InfluxDB, you don't need Elasticsearch. You can save and search dashboards directly from InfluxDB. But for Graphite users, if you want to use save and search dashboards, you have to use Elasticsearch. You can also use sort of JSON files if you want to. But
it's underlying Graphite, right?
Yeah, everything's sort of powered by Graphite, OpenTSDB, or InfluxDB.
So let's say, hypothetically speaking, that I have my own time series database. How do I?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of sort of people who have written custom. There's an abstraction, a data source abstraction. So Carius DB they have a plugin, the data source plugin that you can use with, and HP CloudMon. I think they have sort of written their own sort of data source plugin. But the problem, so there's an abstraction, and you can sort of write your own data sources, but there's very little documentation for the sort of the API and how you have to sort of look at the existing data source sort of to get it to understand the API for how to write that JavaScript code. So, but each data source can provide its own UI for how to query metrics and its own code to sort of how to get data from the backends. It's just a JavaScript API, so how to return the data.
You mentioned that you were going to create new panel types.
Yeah.
Do you know,
The next one probably is going to be some form of a table. So what I'm thinking about is sort of course, sort of viewing time series data just as sort of the raw values. But what would be more interesting is sort of see if you have a couple of metrics where you can time shift them by 1 hour, time shift them by a day, and you can sort of get summaries for the series, min, max, and average and total, but for different time shifts. So you can see, so okay, this is the average for the last hour, this is the average for the last hour yesterday, or so to have that in sort of like a table format would be cool.
Can you get that in a graph now?
Yeah, you can time shift data, and you can sort of get that. I mean, Graphite has this really powerful function called time shift, which I really like, where you can have a query which you can just time shift back a day or a week and see the exact same metric as how it looked a week from today. That's really powerful. Yeah.
Are there plans to support Graphite functions that take in multiple expressions?
Oh yeah, yeah. It is actually supported.
So that's pretty now.
Yeah. So it's not, maybe not super intuitive how you do that, because the way I present these Graphite queries, I mean, the underlying textual representation is still there. But if you want to actually use sort of multiple queries, so let's say I duplicate this. Let's remove that one. And pick one server and pick another server here. That's, I could have one that is all servers. Let's and I can just summarize all these. Hide it. Let's hide that one as well. I'm just going to do that. So what you can do now is actually apply a function directly here. Like if I want to see the percentage of the first query against the other query. Let's add as percent. And I can actually do sort of, I want to compare query A with query B. And you can sort of, yeah, I should probably remove all this function, otherwise it's going to be weird. But and you can do that. A shorthand for that would be just to add as percent A here as well. So if I hide that, I should now get sort of 20%. Since it's 4 servers, I get the percentage of sort of one metric against another. And you can sort of nest these queries indefinitely if you want. This is sort of not exactly how the function feature works in Graphite. In Graphite, these expressions are actually nested. So you get this very long query, but I do that through sort of string substitution. This query and this query. So I replace the bracket A with the first query before I send it to Graphite to get this sort of more complex nested queries to work. Yeah.
The text boxes on the dashboard, is that expanding HTML? Basically, I'm wondering if I can embed other graphs from sources.
To embed sort of an iframe panel, or what do you mean?
Anything, yeah, like graphs from longer.
Yeah. Well, no, there's no way to embed other panels or other websites or something like that. It could be done through a sort of an iframe-like panel. That's actually something that will probably make it into the next release. Is in this share feature to have a sort of not just a link, but also sort of a link to an embedded sort of widget-like URL where you can inject a Grafana graph in an iframe on another web page, for like you do with YouTube and stuff like that.
For one more.
Yep, I kind of like scale to seconds because it depends. Yeah, scale to seconds is something that you normally can't do in other time series databases, and that's because sort of Graphite knows when it does rollups, it knows the times, how much time each value represents. And that's really powerful because if you don't apply scale to seconds, if you zoom out and go to a sort of rollup,
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Fact that we have to apply scale to seconds.
Well, I mean, it's really powerful because you don't lose any information. You can do some. Otherwise, if you you wouldn't have to do that if you sent your metrics as something as a rate. But if you send your metrics as a rate, then you only apply rollups as an average. You lose. You can't do what's the total number of requests for this day. Well, then you would have to sort of multiply that value, and you would only get sort of a rough average. So you lose data by using that. So if you have a counter that you just sum, but you can still do the rate calculation because Graphite knows the amount of seconds for each measurement. But yeah, it's a pain point that you have to know about, because it can be confusing.
Because applying non-negative derivatives without scale to seconds is
Yeah.
almost always wrong.
Yeah.
And that's, I find that
Yeah.
cumbersome with Graphite.
How have you evaluated performance in terms of like how much data can you actually support, how many time series, at what frequency?
Yeah, I mean, it's surprisingly fast. I mean, if you have like 30 graphs, high density graphs on a, it might not be sort of, it might take a second or, but the thing that to know if you're using Graphite is that you have to use Graphite master or you have to use Graphite with patches, because the last release of Graphite, 0912, has a major flaw in its JSON API, in that it returns every data point for the time range you have selected. So if you have selected a week and your resolution is 1 minute, it's going to be like 100,000 data points or something, which is going to crash Chrome and crash Grafana because it's going to be a couple of megabytes of data. But that was fixed like last summer or last March, but it's not in the last release. So you have to apply. The feature is called max data points. So if you apply that feature or that patch, I mean, you can look at weeks and days and years of data, and it's sort of sub-second updates in the UI.